I'm so glad you're here. If you're new, my name is Morgan and I moved to New Zealand with my fiance and dog just a couple years ago, and now I make lifestyle videos about our journey to starting a family on everything health and wellness. Today we're talking about chicken and the many things you can do with one, including cooking it, making it into chicken broth, and even making it into dog food. It's a very simple process and I do it every week. It has just become routine for us because we make dinner with chicken once a week, maybe twice a week, and then we use the broth for soup or another meal that week, and then dog food we make once a month. Why? Well, primarily it saves a lot of money, especially when you compare it to organic, free-range, pre-cut chicken breasts and thighs and legs, things like that in the grocery store. Also, organic chicken broth is very expensive, as well as that high-quality, grain-free organic dog food. Also, I like the idea of using all of the animal and not letting any part go to waste. No, we don't have entirely whole chickens. I don't know how to actually even get one, honestly, but I would be interested in that because organ meats are really good for you and it would be neat to utilize them in meals, but for right now, we just have access to the normal whole chickens in the store. Anyway, in our weekly chicken process, we do use it all, bones included, and so it's just nice to not have to throw that away since the chicken gave its life for us, and I think it shows some appreciation. It kind of reminds me of learning about the Native Americans using every part of the buffalo in elementary school, like carving the bones and using the hide to make teepees and clothing. I always thought that made a lot of sense. Alright, so let's get into it and I will break down my chicken process with you. So in my weekly grocery haul, I always pick up an organic free-range chicken. I do this because by now I'm sure you've most definitely heard how terribly chickens are treated in those big feedlots, and it's overcrowded and they get sick and overfed, and it's just the saddest thing you've ever seen. It's very hard to watch those documentaries, right? So I always try to get the slightly more expensive brand that seems to take care of the chickens. Then that day I come home and cook it, and then I have cooked chicken for the week and I don't have to worry about it later on. Now, I am not one for doing anything fancy in the kitchen or spending loads of time in there, so I always try to find the easiest, most efficient way. So I cook our chicken in a crock pot, and that way I can just set it and forget it. That was for my 90s infomercial lovers. Anyway, I just plop my chicken into the crock pot or slow cooker. I don't actually know what the correct term is, but I feel like crock pot is saying Kleenex and slow cooker is saying tissue. No, like the generic term. Good for crockpot for ruling that market. Anyway, it goes in with just a cup or so of water so it stays moist. Then I pump it up to high and cook it until the internal temperature reaches at least 74 degrees Celsius or 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which for me is a surprisingly 2.5 hours, believe it or not. I've read online that it can take 4 to 6 hours, but I'm guessing it depends on your crock pot temperature and the size of your chicken. Hours are probably on the smaller side. I really love this method of cooking chicken or anything in a crock pot because then you can just leave the house, go for a walk, do whatever you need to do, and you don't have to be in the kitchen at all. After about 2.5 hours, I check it with a meat thermometer to verify the temperature so we don't get salmonella and barf, and go ahead and turn that sucker off to cool a bit. I know, Morgan, why didn't you add anything that would make it taste good? Salt? Nothing? Well, it's because I'm just prepping it for who knows what. Fajitas, chicken noodle soup, chicken salad, I don't know. And I'll just add all those spices and things when I make those meals later. After this sucker has cooled for a bit, I, or more likely Brandon, will take all of the meat off and chuck it in a container for later use. Don't feel bad for him. I think he and the dog eat about half of it in the process. Now we are ready to move on to the broth portion of this process. So easy and hands-off. We use broth in our soups once a week or to make rice and just substitute the water for broth. Gives it a little extra flavor, and then if we have extra, it's just super easy to freeze. What we do is add enough... Hi, Barkley. What we do is add enough water to cover, I guess Barkley's gonna sit on my lap for this portion of the chat. Say hi. What we do is add enough water to cover our chicken carcass in the crock pot that Brandon prepared earlier and left in there, and just a few swigs of apple cider vinegar. What that is going to do is leach those good minerals and nutrients out of the bones and cartilage and nooks and crannies and make it available for our bodies to digest. It's going to pull out things like glucosamine, which is great for your joints, and gelatin, which helps digestion and keeps your hair, skin, and nails healthy. Bone broth is a superfood, and for another superfood recipe, you should check out my chocolate bar recipe up here. That's right. Then we're going to cook it on low for about 24 hours. This will be enough time for the bones to get super mushy, which is key to our next step. So then we're going to turn the sucker off and let it cool maybe about an hour because it is piping hot, let me tell you. Then I'm going to grab a strainer and something to pour it into easily. We're going to pour our broth into a couple of ball jars. I really love these wide mouth jars. They are super easy to clean and get your hands way in there, which is my least favorite part of jars in general, which is also key because we don't have a dishwasher and I lose my mind trying to jam my big fat hands into tiny places. Plus, they make these plastic lids that make it super easy to freeze with. Then we're going to put the carcass bits into a container and chuck it in the freezer for later. So if I know I'm going to make soup or whatever later this week, I'll just chuck it into the fridge, but if not, I will put it in the freezer for a later time. In the fridge, it lasts 3 to 4 days because there's no preservatives in it, but it lasts like 6 months in the freezer. Now you're probably asking why I didn't add any spices or veggies to the broth. Well, because next up we're making dog food, and I choose to not add things like onions and other things that might upset his tummy, along with like spices, salt, things that doggies probably shouldn't have anyways, right? Feel free though to add whatever you feel is appropriate. I know a lot of dog food has like carrots and celeries, peas. Just check for sure that it's safe. Our dog Barkley is a scavenger and loves almost all vegetables, especially bell pepper, which I always thought was very cute. We give Barkley a variety of dog food, mainly raw beef, and it has the added appropriate veggies and nutrients to it, so he gets that from a company that we order from here in New Zealand. We also make beef tallow or render beef tallow, and then we make dog food from like those gristly bits of that. And if we're making squash or pumpkin or something, we also make dog food out of the remains of that because it's supposed to be really good for their tummies. Anyways, we do this whole chicken process throughout the month, and then each time we just put the carcass into that same container and freeze it. And then at the beginning of the month, I will take it out, let it thaw in the fridge overnight, and the next day I'll chuck it into a food processor and grind it all up into a disgusting puree. I know it's gross, but I don't want to take any chances at all with little shards of chicken bones or anything. I want it to be as safe as possible. Then I will get out a sheet pan with a silicone liner and a small cookie scoop. This size is the best that I've found. I've used the bigger size, and then the globs are just too big for him to eat reasonably, and I don't want him to choke. Can you tell that I'm kind of obsessed with my dog? Anyway, I just scoop them out and plop them on to the tray. And then pop it into the freezer. Then I just chuck the bits into a bag and leave it in the freezer to add to his food over the next month. It seems like a bit of a process, but it's not that bad just doing it once a month. I'm obviously not a veterinarian, but if you think about it, dogs have been eating bones forever, and it just seems to make sense. Each time I feed him, I just take a few and add it to his dog food about 30 minutes before I feed him so it can thaw a little bit. You could also use them as dog treats now that I think about it. And don't take my word for it. Just ask Barkley, he is a very happy dog. Alright, so that is my whole chicken process. 3 different items that would normally cost loads more and might have ingredients hiding in them that you wouldn't approve of. So if you're interested, give it a go. It really does work for us and has been for the last few years. You'll have chicken, you'll have broth, you'll have dog food, and now that I think about it, you could probably use the dog food as cat food as well. I don't have cats, so I better not speak on their behalf, but cat food does kind of look like that puree, doesn't it? I don't know. Let me know if that would work in the comments if you have a cat, and please let me know if you ran into any snags or if it turned out well for you. And if you don't have a crock pot, we need to talk. You're gonna need to get one. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to sharing more recipes like this one and hacks and tips and things that have worked for us. I also might make like a how I plan our meals video, because if you're like me and don't want to think about dinner like an hour before you eat, it just sounds very stressful. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. I make new videos like this every week, and if you have any questions or ideas for more videos, I would love for you to let me know in the comments below, and I'd love for you to come on this journey with me. Alright, we'll see you next week. Bye. Goodbye. Bye. Speaking of dinner. Nice. Now I did it. Said the word. He's gone. We gotta go. It's a very she said to no one. But interested in, but anyways, I always get the, so I cook our chicken in a crock pot. Said it and forget it. We use broth in our soups once a week, or to make rice, and I guess Barkley's gonna sit on my lap for this portion of the just a few, and then I'm gonna grab a strainer and something to pour it in, mainly a raw beef, made of mainly raw beef, and it has mainly raw beef. Just make sure it is safe. Just make sure it's safe. Pan with a silicone liner. Take those little chunks. Speaking of dinner, I gotta go feed the dog.